The Apache war party struck without warning, their painted horses thundering across the desert floor like vengeful spirits. Scarlett O'Brien pressed her face against the stagecoach window, her heart hammering as arrows whistled past. The baby in her arms, little Thomas, wailed as the coach lurched violently to one side. "Get down!" shouted the driver. But his words were cut short by a war cry that chilled her blood. The stagecoach tilted, wheels spinning uselessly in the air before crashing onto its side with bone-jarring force. Scarlett clutched Thomas tighter, shielding him with her body as splintered wood rained down around them. Before we continue with Scarlett's incredible journey, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to help me reach my first 50 subscribers. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more epic Western romance tales. Now let's get back to the story. Strong hands seized her, hauling her from the wreckage. Scarlett found herself staring into the darkest eyes she'd ever seen, eyes that belonged to a warrior, whose bronze chest was painted with symbols she couldn't read. His black hair hung in 2 braids adorned with eagle feathers, and despite the fierce paint streaking his face, she was struck by the sharp intelligence in his gaze. "Please," she whispered, clutching Thomas. "Don't hurt my baby." The warrior's eyes dropped to the infant, then back to her face. He spoke rapidly in Apache to the other men, his voice carrying an unmistakable authority. Whatever he said caused them to lower their weapons slightly. "Nalnish," he said, pointing to himself. Then, in broken English, "You come." It wasn't a request. They rode hard through the desert. Scarlett mounted behind Nalnish on his painted warhorse. His body was solid muscle beneath her touch, and despite her terror, she couldn't ignore the way his warmth seeped through his buckskin shirt. The rhythm of the horse's gait pressed her closer against his back, and she felt his breathing change when her arms tightened around his waist. Thomas had stopped crying, seemingly mesmerized by the warrior holding the reins. The baby's tiny fingers reached out to touch one of Nalnish's braids, and Scarlett held her breath, expecting anger. Instead, the Apache warrior's stern expression softened almost imperceptibly. They rode until sunset painted the sky crimson, finally stopping at a hidden canyon where smoke rose from several wickiups. Women emerged from the brush dwellings, their dark eyes curious as they studied the white woman and her child. An elderly Apache woman with silver hair approached, speaking rapidly to Nalnish. "Grandmother says you will stay with her," Nalnish translated, his English heavily accented but understandable. "Your child, too." "What do you want from me?" Scarlett asked, exhaustion making her voice shake. Nalnish's dark gaze held hers for a long moment. "That remains to be seen, white woman. You are not like the others who come to our land." The elderly woman, whom the others called Grandmother Ithka, took Scarlett's arm gently but firmly, leading her toward one of the larger wickiups. Inside, the dwelling was surprisingly comfortable, with soft furs and woven baskets arranged around a central fire pit. That first night, Scarlett lay awake listening to the desert sounds, coyotes calling in the distance, the whisper of wind through the canyon walls, and the soft breathing of Thomas beside her. She was a mail-order bride, supposed to meet her intended husband in Silver Creek, Arizona. Instead, she was captive in an Apache camp, her fate uncertain. Days blurred into weeks. Slowly, Scarlett began to understand the rhythms of camp life. The Apache women showed her how to grind corn, weave baskets, and prepare food. Thomas thrived, growing plump and content under the attention of the entire tribe, who seemed to view all children as precious gifts. And always, there was Nalnish. He would appear at unexpected moments, bringing her fresh water from the spring, teaching her words in Apache, or simply watching her with those penetrating dark eyes. She learned he was a war leader, respected and feared by his people. But with Thomas, he was surprisingly gentle. The baby had taken to reaching for him whenever he came near, and Nalnish never refused the child's silent request to be held. "Why did you take me?" Scarlett asked one evening, as they sat by the central fire. Thomas slept peacefully in her arms, and the rest of the camp had grown quiet. Nalnish was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke. My wife died in the winter sickness. My son, too, when I saw you protecting your child." He paused, his jaw tightening. "A mother's love is sacred. I could not let the others harm you." "The others wanted to hurt us?" "Some. They have lost much to the white man's guns. But Grandmother Ithka had a vision. She saw a woman with hair like flame and a child who would bridge two worlds." His eyes found hers across the fire. "She said this child would father a new people." Scarlett's breath caught. "What does that mean?" "Dreams are powerful things among my people. Grandmother believes your son will grow to lead both Apache and white blood into a new future." Nalnish leaned forward, the firelight dancing across his strong features. But first, his mother must choose her path. The weight of his words settled between them like a challenge. Scarlett found herself studying his face, the proud line of his nose, the full curve of his lips, the way his eyes seemed to hold depths she was only beginning to understand. "And if I choose to stay," she whispered. Something flickered in his expression. Hope, desire, uncertainty all mixed together. "Then you would truly become one of us. If you're loving this tale so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. I'm working hard to reach 50 subscribers, and every single one of you makes a difference. Help me grow this channel." Now, back to Scarlett. The summer months passed like a fever dream. Scarlett learned to ride Apache style, her legs strong around the horse's flanks, her red hair flowing free in the desert wind. She discovered she had a gift for languages, picking up Apache words with surprising speed. The women began including her in their councils, seeking her opinion on matters affecting the camp. But it was the nights that changed everything. Nalnish began teaching her to read the stars, his body a warm presence beside her as they lay on their backs looking up at the vast desert sky. His fingers would brush hers as he pointed out constellations, and each touch sent fire racing through her veins. "In my language, we call that one the Great Bear," he said one night, his voice low and intimate. "And what does the Great Bear represent?" Scarlett asked, very aware of how his shoulder touched hers. "Protection, strength, the fierce love that drives a warrior to defend what is precious to him." She turned her head to look at him, finding his face closer than she'd expected. In the starlight, his features were both savage and beautiful, carved from shadow and moonbeam. "What is precious to you, Nalnish?" His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb stroking across her skin. "You know the answer to that, Flame Hair." The kiss, when it came, was soft at first, a question rather than a demand. But when Scarlett's lips parted under his, inviting him deeper, his control shattered. He rolled over her, his body covering hers as his mouth claimed hers with desperate hunger. She could taste the wildness in him, the barely leashed passion that made her own desire spiral out of control. His hands tangled in her hair, and she arched beneath him, needing to feel more of his weight, his warmth, his desire for her. When he pulled back, both of them were breathing hard. "Scarlett," he whispered against her lips, her name a prayer in his deep voice. "Yes," she breathed, understanding the question he was asking without words. He made love to her there under the stars, his hands and mouth worshipping her body with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a claim. When she cried out his name as pleasure crashed over her, the sound echoed off the canyon walls like a wild song. Afterward, they lay entwined, her head on his chest, listening to his heart beat strong and steady beneath her ear. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. His arms tightened around her. "And I love you, my Flame Hair, more than the sky loves the earth, more than the desert loves the rain." But their happiness was fragile as morning dew. The cavalry came at dawn, their blue uniforms stark against the red rocks. Scarlett woke to the sound of shouting, gunfire, and Thomas crying in terror. Nalnish was already on his feet, reaching for his weapons. "Stay here," he commanded, but Scarlett was already gathering Thomas and her few possessions. "I'm not hiding while you fight for your life." The battle was swift and brutal. The Apache fought like wildcats, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Scarlet saw Nalnish take a bullet in the shoulder, watched him stumble but keep fighting, and her heart nearly stopped. When the smoke cleared, half the warriors lay dead or wounded. The survivors were being rounded up by the soldiers, their hands bound behind their backs. "There she is!" The cavalry captain pointed directly at Scarlet. "Mrs. Henderson, we've come to rescue you." "My name is O'Brien," Scarlet said coldly, clutching Thomas protectively. "And I don't need rescuing." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, you've clearly been through an ordeal. These savages kidnapped you, held you against your will. We're here to take you to safety." "I'm exactly where I want to be." "Don't be ridiculous. No civilized woman would choose to stay with these heathens." Scarlet's temper flared. "These people saved my life and that of my son. They've shown me more kindness than any civilized person ever has." But her protests fell on deaf ears. The soldiers dragged her away from the camp, away from Nalnish, whose dark eyes never left her face even as they bound his hands. "I'll find you," he called out in Apache. "No matter how far they take you, I'll find you. And I'll be waiting," she called back in the same language. The soldiers took her to Fort Grant, where she was questioned extensively about her captivity. No matter how many times she insisted she'd been treated well, they refused to believe her. The fort's doctor examined Thomas, proclaiming him remarkably healthy for a child who'd been subjected to savage conditions. "What were you doing in Apache territory in the first place?" asked Major Williams, the fort commander. "I was traveling to Silver Creek to marry a man named Henderson. My stagecoach was attacked, and the Apache war party found me in the wreckage. Well, Henderson's long gone. Gave up waiting months ago and married a local widow instead." The major's expression softened slightly. "But don't worry, Mrs. O'Brien. We'll find you safe passage back east." "I don't want to go back east. Ma'am, with respect, you've been through a traumatic experience. Once you've had time to recover—" "I'm not traumatized," Scarlet snapped. "I'm in love." The major's face darkened. "With one of those Apache bucks? Ma'am, that's not love. That's Stockholm Syndrome. It's common among captives. You'll recover." But Scarlet knew better. What she felt for Nalnish was real, powerful, and worth fighting for. That night, she began planning her escape. 3 weeks later, Scarlet slipped out of Fort Grant under cover of darkness, Thomas strapped to her back in a cradleboard she'd fashioned from memory of the Apache designs. She'd stolen a horse, supplies, and a rifle, skills Nalnish had taught her during their time together. The desert at night was both beautiful and terrifying. Coyotes called from distant ridges, and the wind through the saguaro cacti sounded like ghostly whispers. But Scarlet pressed on, following the stars Nalnish had taught her to read. She found the Apache camp 3 days later, or what was left of it. The wickiups had been burned, the cooking pot smashed. But there were signs, broken twigs arranged in patterns she recognized, stones placed in specific formations, messages left for those who knew how to read them. Following the subtle trail, Scarlet tracked the survivors deeper into the mountains, to a hidden valley she'd never seen before. This camp was smaller, more carefully concealed, but the moment she rode into the clearing, she was surrounded by familiar faces. And there was Nalnish, his shoulder bound with clean bandages, his eyes wide with disbelief and joy. "Flame hair," he breathed, and then she was in his arms, Thomas squealing with delight as the warrior lifted both of them from the horse. "How did you find us?" he asked, his hands framing her face as if to convince himself she was real. "You taught me to read the signs, and I told you I'd be waiting." That night they held a ceremony. Grandmother Ithka, who had survived the raid despite her age, painted symbols on Scarlet's face and hands while chanting in Apache. Thomas, now walking and babbling in both English and Apache, toddled around the circle, bringing smiles to even the most grief-stricken faces. "What is she saying?" Scarlet asked Nalnish. "She's welcoming you as a daughter of the people. You are no longer Scarlet O'Brien, white woman. You are Flamehair, mother of the bridge builder, wife of Nalnish." "Wife?" His dark eyes were suddenly uncertain. "If you will have me, I know I can offer you little. We live as fugitives now, always moving, always hiding. But I can offer you my heart, my protection, my love for as long as I draw breath." Scarlett's answer was a kiss that left no room for doubt. They were married under the full moon, with the surviving members of the tribe as witnesses. Grandmother Ithaca bound their hands with a cord, made from eagle feathers and beads, while the shaman spoke words of blessing over them. When Nalnish lifted her face to his and kissed her, the desert itself seemed to sing with joy. Their wedding night was spent in a secluded canyon, where Nalnish had prepared a wickiup decorated with wildflowers and soft furs. He undressed her slowly, his hands reverent as they mapped every curve of her body. "My wife," he murmured against her throat, and the word sent shivers of pleasure through her. "My husband," she replied, her fingers tracing the strong lines of his chest, the scars that told the story of his battles. When he joined with her, it was with a tenderness that made her weep, not from pain but from the overwhelming rightness of it. They moved together like dancers who'd been partnered for lifetimes, each touch perfectly timed, each kiss exactly what the other needed. Afterward, as they lay skin to skin in the flickering firelight, Nalnish traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Do you ever regret leaving your world behind?" he asked quietly. Scarlett considered the question seriously. "My world never wanted me as I truly am. It wanted me to be smaller, quieter, more obedient. Here with you, I can be everything I was meant to be. Even when it means danger, hardship. Especially then, I'd rather face 1,000 dangers as your wife than live safely as someone else's possession." The years that followed tested that resolve repeatedly. They lived as nomads, moving from canyon to canyon, always one step ahead of the cavalry. Thomas grew tall and strong, equally comfortable on horseback and on foot, speaking Apache as fluently as English. His unusual upbringing made him wise beyond his years, a natural diplomat who could see all sides of every conflict. When Thomas was 7, a delegation from the territorial government approached them under a flag of truce. The leader, a weathered man named Commissioner Brady, had come with an unusual proposal. "The Apache wars are bleeding this territory dry," he said, sitting across from Nalnish and Scarlett around their campfire. "Too many good people on both sides have died. We need someone who can speak for both worlds, someone both sides trust." His eyes fell on Thomas, who was teaching a Apache boy his age how to read English letters in the dirt. "That boy of yours, he's the future. Half-white, raised Apache, loved by both peoples. He could be the bridge we desperately need." "What are you proposing?" Nalnish asked carefully. "A reservation, but not like the others. A place where Apache and whites can live together, learn from each other. Your son would be groomed as a leader, educated in both traditions, trained in diplomacy, prepared to guide his people into a new era." Scarlett and Nalnish exchanged glances. It was exactly what Grandmother Ithaca had prophesied years ago. The negotiation took months, but eventually they reached an agreement. The new reservation would be established in a fertile valley with good water and hunting grounds. Thomas would split his time between formal schooling and traditional Apache training. Most importantly, families would not be separated, and Apache customs would be respected and preserved. Thank you so much for reading, listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please smash that like button and subscribe to help me reach my goal of 50 subscribers. Your support helps me create more amazing Western romance stories for you. What did you think of this story? Let me know in the comments below. 20 years later, Scarlett stood on a hill overlooking the thriving community that had grown from Commissioner Brady's radical experiment. Houses built in both Apache and Anglo styles dotted the landscape. Children with features that reflected dozens of different heritages played together in the dusty streets. The trading post did business in 4 languages, and in the center of it all stood Thomas, now calling himself Thomas Bridgewalker, addressing a gathering of tribal elders, government officials, and ordinary citizens who'd come to witness the signing of the first treaty, negotiated entirely by Native Americans. "My mother always told me that love was the strongest medicine," Thomas said, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd. "She loved my father enough to leave everything familiar behind. He loved her enough to risk his life protecting her choice, and together, They created something new. Not just their love, but this entire community we call home. Nalnish's arm tightened around Scarlett's waist. His hair was now streaked with silver, and lines creased his weathered face, but his love for her had only deepened with the years. "Do you think Grandmother Ithaca knew it would turn out like this?" Scarlett asked, watching their son command the attention of hundreds with the same natural authority his father had always possessed. "I think she saw possibilities, not certainties," Nalnish replied. "The vision was a seed. We planted it, watered it with our love and sacrifice, and this is what grew." Their grandson, Thomas's eldest son with his wife Maria, a Mexican Apache woman who worked as the reservation's teacher, came running up the hill toward them, his face bright with excitement. "Grandmother Flamehair! Grandfather! Papa says the treaty's signed. We're going to have our own schools, our own government, everything." Scarlett scooped up the boy, marveling at how his features blended so many different heritages. Thomas's strong jaw, Maria's dark eyes, Nalnish's high cheekbones, and Scarlett's stubborn chin. He was living proof that love could indeed create something entirely new. As the celebration began in earnest below, with drums and fiddles competing for attention, Nalnish pulled Scarlett into his arms and began swaying to the mixed rhythm. "Any regrets, my Flamehair?" She smiled up at him, her heart as full as it had been on their wedding night. "Only that I didn't fight harder to get kidnapped sooner." His laughter rumbled through his chest as he spun her around, her graying red hair flying free in the desert wind. Around them, two worlds that had once been separated by fear and misunderstanding continued their dance of becoming one. And in the years to come, as Thomas Bridgewalker's children and grandchildren spread throughout the territory, some becoming teachers, others ranchers, still others tribal leaders and business owners, Grandmother Ithaca's vision proved more prophetic than anyone could have imagined. The child of a mail-order bride and an Apache warrior truly had started a new people, one that carried the best of both worlds into a future bright with possibility.